right now, with our lion program, we have 9 callers out on different lions and different social groups, prides, and coalitions. And not only do we use that for basic ecological work and understanding where they move, but it feeds into an automated alert system that we've developed.
Thanks for tuning into Tusk Talks, a podcast exploring stories from Africa's conservation voices. I'm Bea Karanja, a conservation storyteller, philanthropist, and child of Africa. The African continent is alive with energy and innovation. By 2050, 1 in 4 of the global population will be an African. Africa is also home to 30% of the world's biodiversity and a third of the planet's freshwater. In this series, we'll bring you the incredible life stories and experiences of some of Africa's most dynamic conservation leaders. From the coastal deserts of northwestern Namibia to the undulating tablelands of northern Botswana, we meet the conservation heroes working for a brighter future for all across Africa. Welcome to Tusk Talks. From camera traps to satellites to drones, conservation technology is increasingly critical to ensuring that people and nature thrive. In this episode, I'm joined by Andrew Stein, who in 2023 led an international team for the IUCN Red List to assist the global status of leopards. His interests span the carnivore families, and his work also explores non-lethal approaches to mitigate human-lion conflict in northern Botswana. Dumela, and
Camilla.
I hope I said that right, Andrew.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, great to have you, Andrew. Really great to have you. So, you're from Massachusetts. What was it like growing up in Massachusetts? What wildlife and nature did you grow up with?
As a child, I was the one that always had like a net and a bucket whenever we went to the lake. I was the one turning over boards in the yard to find salamanders and garter snakes. So those are the things that really fascinated me. All the different shapes and sizes and behaviors and movements of all these different kinds of animals that I could actually get my hands on. One of the things that really fascinated me, and I think this was sort of what was the very, very beginning, was out of my bedroom window. I shared a bedroom with my brother, older brother, and robins started building a nest, like right on the branch facing the window, not even a foot from the window. And I would just sit on that bed and watch as they brought one twig after another and then other nesting material. They laid the eggs and then incubated the eggs, and then the eggs started to hatch. It was like perfectly framed, like a documentary television show, like right out of my bedroom window. Now, my brother had no interest. I mean, he'd go into the yard and play baseball or something, or play catch, and I was, no, I want to watch this. And since then, it's sort of grown. But I always fantasized about exotic places far away with really big wildlife, bigger than the squirrels or raccoons or skunks that were in our neighborhood. Like the big predators really captured my imagination.
And do you think that is what led you into being a conservationist?
Yeah, I think so. It was interesting because I think all children are fascinated by animals, and I just never grew out of it. Everyone else develops other interests, and I just sort of stayed on that path. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I knew, I'd be 8, 9 years old and saying, I don't want to be a veterinarian. I don't want to do surgery on somebody's dog or something. And I knew I didn't want to work in a zoo, but I didn't know what conservation really was. I didn't know anybody that had gone to Africa, for example. So I wasn't sure what my path was going to be when I was younger. And it wasn't until going to college for zoology and then doing study abroad in Kenya and meeting people doing research, realizing I'm not that different from them. Like they're not these special people that I can't relate to, or I can't see myself doing that. And I realized with conservation that it was sort of the confluence of all the things that I valued, which was wildlife and travel and culture, and then making a contribution or doing something to better the world. And that's really what conservation is all of those things combined.
Indeed, indeed. I love the curiosity of when we're all young and where that curiosity takes us and how it gets us to there. And yours just started with literally your own private TV screen, live TV screen with birds nesting. So that's really cool. So
Yeah.
that was birds. But what drew you to leopards?
I think really watching these documentaries and seeing the cats. My favorite stuffed animal growing up was the Pink Panther. Like cats were always something that really fascinated me, and just I can even picture it in my mind now. The cats as they stalk and the roll of the shoulder blade. They're just
Mm.
so elegant and agile and strong and so well designed. Leopards. When I was younger, I really loved cheetahs and then lions, and it was going to Kenya and going to Samburu National Reserve and seeing my first leopard just resting in a tree. We were the first vehicle to get there, and the sun was there and it's stretching. And I just thought, this is the most perfectly designed animal for its purpose. There's nothing more perfect than a leopard, in my opinion. And so when I realized this and I started thinking about it, there was so much work that had been done on cheetahs. That's even more work done on lions, but there was hardly anything at the time done on leopard. And so I thought, this is where I could make a contribution. This is the most widely distributed cat in the world. How do we not know very much about it? And this is, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I said, all right, I could be somebody that could really make a contribution here.
Wow, you've just opened my eyes. I had no idea about leopards being the most widely distributed cat around the world. I had no idea. What is claws and what does claws do?
So, CLAWS stands for Communities Living Among Wildlife Sustainably. We started in 2014 in response to devastating poisoning events that was targeting lions in retaliation for livestock losses. So, we have a two-pronged approach to our work because we realized that people were using poison and they felt that all lions were a problem. We wanted to individualize those lions by giving them names. So we would go to the village when we collared an animal, and we would ask the villagers to give them names in their local language to develop a close relationship between the cats and people. And then that was what we started using within our alert system, using the names that they were given by people in the village. So that's the technology side. The tradition side of our work focuses on communal herding. So in the past, herding was part of the culture, but in the last several generations, many of the young herd boys who were 10, 12 years old in the field chasing away lions, hyenas, and leopards are now in school, getting an education, and many of the adult men in the village see it as a job of low status. So what we've done is we've created a program working with Herding for Health to train herders as what we call eco rangers. They learn about eco literacy, basic veterinary care for cattle. They learn about conflict mitigation techniques and bring their cattle together in a communal herd with a mobile boma or kraal so that we can actually practice planned grazing to reverse the effects of overgrazing. So we formed a grazing committee that's elected by the village, and they make all the decisions about which herders are hired, which medications to give, where to move those cattle seasonally based on their traditional knowledge. And from there, we've been able to develop partnerships with government, with local lodges, where we can sell the beef from this cattle as wildlife friendly beef. And some of the lodges are actually willing to purchase that beef for 40, 50% more than what people would normally get paid in local markets or slaughtering in the village. So there are real tangible benefits for households that participate in the program. Virtually no losses, employments for locals, restored rangelands, even carbon sequestration, and then a better price.
Brilliant. Absolutely amazing, Andrew. Absolutely amazing. So, we always know that protected areas or areas where there's wildlife is near communities, and communities being farmers or small livelihoods. So, some view farming as incongruous with conservation. What do you think?
Well, my experience over the last 20 years or so, I've worked in South Africa on farmland, commercial farms. I've worked in Kenya in areas where there's a mosaic of commercial farms and communal group ranches, Namibia, where I did my PhD on commercial farms. and then now in Botswana where we're working with communities. And yeah, I think that there is this narrative that they're not compatible. And in talking to farmers in different places, you realize that in some of these landscapes, some of these wildlife still exist. You still have lions, you still have elephants, you still have these big species. And if these people didn't want them to exist, they would be completely gone. Right? This is part of the heritage of people in these areas, and they value them even though there are some levels of conflict. What I've learned, though, and some of the things that we're implementing now in farmlands in northern Botswana, is that there are a number of traditional practices that, if tweaked slightly with information and data collection, we can show very clearly that people can live and coexist and even thrive on landscapes with lions, leopards, and other large carnivores.
Which is a good segue into the next question, which is what are those threats to lions? What is the biggest threat to lions right now?
So the biggest threat to lions is habitat fragmentation and conflict with people. And so we've lost half of Africa's lions in the last 25 years, and that trend is continuing. So, for example, in our area in 2013, there was so much conflict between farmers and them losing livestock that in retaliation, they started using poison, and they wiped out between 25 and 30 lions in that single year. And that was really what was the genesis of our program. We started the year after to try to speak to farmers who clearly had a serious problem and were in such desperation that they felt the need to use poison. So we came with compassion to say, if these are the drastic measures people are taking, they're clearly hurting. So how can we help them protect their resources in a way that can be non-lethal for lions, and try to create a landscape where both can survive and prosper.
And I like what you said about desperately hurting, because I think that's the thing that we forget. It's not a vindictive thing. It's just someone who's just desperate to just try and get something, because every time they go 2 steps ahead, then they go 1 step behind, losing 3 goats or 2 sheep. So you can imagine if it happens to you over and over again, it is that desperation, absolute abject desperation. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. So, in your work, do you find similarities in human carnivore conflict across the world? And are there ways of mitigating, say, for instance, wolves in Montana is the same as lions in Botswana? Is it the same framework that you can do and then you just enact the initiative, or is it specific to region, community?
Yeah, what I find is that people are people. And so the things that people are most concerned with in communities in Botswana or Kenya or Namibia or Montana are the same. Right? People want to live in a place where they can raise their family and with some level of security, be able to pay their bills. A lot of the people that are farming in these areas are not trying to get rich or something. They're just trying to pay their bills, pay school fees. So when I've spoken to ranchers in Montana or farmers in Southern Africa, first of all, there is a certain level of distrust that starts the conversation. So there's a bit of a hill to climb there. Oftentimes, when I start my conversations, I say, I'm not a farmer. I didn't grow up with livestock. I mean, I grew up in a small city, and I'm certainly not African. And even people in Montana were from the same country, but it's a very different culture out there. So I start by saying, I'm here to collect information. And if there's any information that I can collect over the course of my study that can be beneficial for you, please let me know, and I'll try to incorporate that and report back to you as frequently as possible. And then it's a matter of just finding 1 or 2 people within those communities that have an open mind enough to open the door and have honest conversations. And then you sort of build relationships from there. But I find that the techniques might be slightly different. The behavior of the animals, how they approach livestock, how they move through the environment, There's certain technologies that might work for one better than what works for another. But if you zoom out, you're looking at it from bird's eye view. A lot of the questions, a lot of the fundamentals are the same because we're all people with all the same needs.
Yeah. And so you mentioned technology, Andrew. Could you tell our listeners how technology has shaped your work and the work of Claws?
Sure. So one of the really interesting things, like when I was first getting started, I feel like I was sort of the tail end of the old school guys who trapped animals, put radio transmitters on, and then you'd have to drive around or walk around with an antenna, listening for beeps. My first project in South Africa, I didn't have a vehicle, so I'm tracking leopards on foot for like up to 9 hours a day. Sometimes I'd walk close to a bush that would shake a bit and a deep growl would come. I'd have to kind of retreat up on a rock and listen to the receiver. And so at that time, if you triangulated like 20, 30 points, locations for that animal, like that was a pretty good data set. But now we're using GPS satellite collars and you get tens of thousands of locations. Right now, with our lion program, we have 9 collars out on different lions and different social groups, prides, and coalitions. And not only do we use that for basic ecological work and understanding where they move, but it feeds into an automated alert system that we've developed, whereby we create these what are called geofences or virtual boundaries on the computer. And when that caller breaches that geofence, it delivers a real-time alert directly to people's cell phones with the name of the lion and how far away that lion is, so that they can take preventative action. So the technology enables us to provide real-time information that can really save the lives of lions and protect the resources of people. And it bypasses us. We don't have to be the gatekeepers. So it also develops a certain level of trust.
I mean, technology is moving so fast and advancing so fast. And there's an argument that AI, artificial intelligence, removes people from nature. What do you think about that?
I feel like technology, of course, is a tool that can be used in ways that can be really beneficial, or it can be used in ways that kind of pulls us apart from the natural world. So I'll be very curious to see exactly how AI is used. Like I've spoken to colleagues who use different camera trapping devices that can actually analyze the shape of animals like in real time, and then or if they identify poachers or people that are logging, can actually get that reported directly to park authorities and things like that, and so they can have a rapid response. And so there are definitely some applications that way that could be really incredible. And that way, we're dealing with limited resources, and if you don't have patrol teams out all the time, but you have like some of these cameras set up in strategic places, that can save you a lot of a lot of resources with trying to get people around and some of the challenges that people face being in the field. So I think that could be an application that would be really valuable. But I do think sometimes the application of technology does remove us, and what happens is, by putting out satellite tracking collars, for example, and a biologist can sit in an air conditioned office and look on Google Earth where the animal's moving and get a sense of habitat. You start to interpret those things without doing ground truthing and seeing exactly what's happening on the ground. And my worry is that sometimes that can lead to misinterpretation if you don't have a deep foundation in ecology and ecological processes.
And I think there's also the understanding between AI, machine learning, and what all of that is. But that's a whole nother discussion altogether.
Yes.
So, do you have, in that same vein, do you have any hopes for the future of technology in conservation?
Yes, I do. I really love the way that these callers have contributed to this information alert system that we've developed. So the next steps with that are to really get people involved in understanding where the lions are moving, collecting information, even doing sort of citizen science projects where people can come together within the villages and report what they see with different signs. Or within our team, we're using smartphones for our herders and our research team to be able to collect information that can go directly from their smartphone into our database. So we're in the process of implementing that. And that streamlines everything, right? You can even use it with photos instead of having somebody write on a piece of paper and then it rains or it gets lost or gets ripped in the field, or it's illegible, or like there's all sorts of things that can happen, or like people type it in and there might be a small mistake with that and then you have to follow up months later. So in those ways, I think technology can really help a lot. We're working with Earth Ranger and some of our colleagues that are studying lions in areas surrounding us, including in Namibia. And when our lions cross the border into Namibia occasionally, and lions from Namibia come to us. And so when we can share a database, when their lions cross the border, we can get pinged so that we know when they're in our area and we can go and follow up on their animal and vice versa, so that when they cross the border, they're not completely lost. Like there are lots of different ways that technology can be a real asset and provide immediate information. And that's exciting.
I think it makes everything more efficient, and it allows us to make seriously informed decisions based on sound science and data that is right there in front of you. Data doesn't lie.
Yes.
Right. So it's great that we have those tools, and those tools are advancing to get us better, sharper, more laser focused in the interventions that we need to put into conservation. So that's great. So
one thing that can be a challenge is to try to explain some of the technology that we're using to people on the ground, people in rural villages where they may not have access to computers all the time. They may not have access to learning about AI and things like that. So when you're trying to explain these things, you have to have somebody who's well versed in the technology itself, which, as you say, is advancing so rapidly. Like I'm already behind, and like I'm immersed in it. Like I live in communities of people that think about it and talk about it and work with it all the time. You can imagine people that live in places where there's no running water and no electricity in their homes, and they're just they're living a subsistence life, and the technology we use today didn't exist 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So how are they going to catch up and really understand what we're implementing, why, how it works? I mean, I hardly understand how some of it works, So it's a challenge.
the good thing is, though, with your technology is matched by the enthusiasm and the tools that the community have at their disposal, their smartphones or even analog phones these days. So what I think is really cool is what you were saying, that work with the communities. What you were telling us yesterday, that they've said, okay, our preferred communication is this. And that is another form of technology. Voice notes are another form of technology. So it's relevant, using the relevant technology for the what you call it, the entry point that you're looking for.
Yes, exactly. I mean, with this alert system, that was one of the first things we did. Like early on, we started delivering messages in ways that made sense to us, right? So we didn't have a fully automated system. We would get the alert, and then we would send a text message to somebody in the village and say, please send this to your neighbor, or please speak to whoever. Sometimes this was happening in the middle of the night when lions are active. Then we had workshops and we're talking to people, and if we're going to implement the system, we want it to work in a way that's going to be inclusive. It's going to encourage people to engage with it and use that information to take action. And so in those workshops, we found out, not everybody is literate, even though they have a cell phone, right? They pick up the phone and start talking. So for some people, we deliver messages by voice notes, and other people, we can deliver it via text. And then also, we'd ask their language preference, because delivering a message in English to somebody really isn't effective. So we have over 250 people signed up, and each person can select the preference for which they can receive these messages. And that makes a big difference. It shows that we care above and beyond anything else.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. That's very super cool. So, Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about the work you do and how Tusk has made a difference to claws?
Yes. So Tusk has been an exceptional partner for us. First of all, aside from the funding that comes in, which is obviously essential for the running of our program, the support that we receive from the staff, the network that we have been embraced by and become a part of, it's very much like a family environment. And so when we find ourselves dealing with challenges, members of the Tusk team can actually point us in a direction, give us advice. We can get on a call with some of the other Tusk partners. Now, the funding, of course, has been wonderful for us, really developing this alert system. The funding came along at a really important point in our organization, where we really wanted to expand and scale up. We were starting to see early successes, but we really didn't have the resources to expand it. And Tusk came in and gave us a real boost that allowed us to amplify what we were doing. And now it's a partnership that from year to year we can really count on Tusk, and they can count on us to deliver in the field.
Brilliant. And having studied carnivores, which would you say is your best carnivore?
The top one for me is definitely the leopard. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like they're the most perfect animal. And so, like, even doing the work that I'm doing now with the IUCN for the red list, we just turned in the assessment, and just looking at the fact that they're not doing as well as we thought. And so we need to get the word out and make sure that people realize, even they're very secretive, they're very adaptable, but even still, in large areas of the range, the populations are going down, and we don't want them to go the same way as the tiger and the lion and other large carnivores.
I just have one last question. What is the future of Africa conservation, Andrew? In your eyes, you tell us, what is the future?
The future of African conservation is the involvement of local communities at the heart of it. I think that one of the things I learned really early on, coming from a country and a region of the country where we've lost a lot of our wildlife and a lot of the larger species. When you come to Africa, you realize that the species are still here. There's been generations and generations and generations of people that understood how to live on a landscape. And in many ways, we in the West are behind. And to realize that, and to speak to people in these villages, in these landscapes, who know the answers, they know the answers far more than I ever will. And so to recognize that and put that at the forefront, and to be able to provide the support and opportunities and engagement to provide a platform for people to raise their voices and amplify that, and put into place plans based on their traditional knowledge and resource use. I think that's the only way. It's the only way it's going to work.
Excellent, excellent. So I said hello to you in your language. Now I'm going to say goodbye to you in my language. Asante sana.
Asante kabisa.
Thanks for listening to Tusk Talks, stories from Africa's conservation voices. Please subscribe to Tusk Talks wherever you get your podcasts. If you have enjoyed listening, please share the podcast with your friends and leave a review. That's the best way to ensure the podcast reaches as many people as possible. In the meantime, you can find out more about Tusk's work and our incredible conservation at tusk.org. Thanks again for listening. Asante sana. Stay tuned for a sneak listen of our next episode.
I think that obviously coral bleaching is a result of increasing sea temperatures, which is linked to climate change. Now, I think climate change can be quite an overwhelming concept for people to understand. Well, not so much understand, but to think what can they do about it,